Hello, my lovelies. Thank you for coming back and joining me for Chapter 14 of You Don't Have to Be Evil to Work Here, But It Helps. J.W. Wells & Co., Book 4 by Tom Holt. Now, I've got a completely new computer set up, so if anything sounds weird, by all means, please let me know, because all feedback is good feedback and all that jazz. As always, I love it when you leave me a comment or just to say hello, or if you want to share or click the notifications bell or, subscribe if you'd like to. Always good to see you coming back, Petal. But, as it's Friday and it's nearly the weekend, it's time to get cracking. Chapter 14. Colin drifted back into reception. He wasn't quite sure why. Maybe it was the same instinct that motivates cats on wet days to go and see if there's a door where it isn't raining. If so, it hadn't worked. Fam wasn't behind the desk. It was just that Rosie person. She looked at him and grinned. "Hello," she said. If he'd been wise, he'd have paid more attention to the grin. Humans, with their lamentable tendency to anthropomorphise, are an easy mark for any species that opens its mouth and displays its teeth. They're either unaware of or willfully blind to the fact that, in most of the animal kingdom, the gesture doesn't mean what they think it does. "Anything I can do for you?" she asked. Colin shook his head.
It's all right," he said. I'm waiting for an important fax, and I was wondering if it had come in yet. That's all."
Ah, Rosie's grin widened to Little Red Riding Hood surrogate granny proportions. "If you're not too busy," she said, "could you spare a couple of ticks to answer a question for me?"
"Sure."
"All right. What the hell is it about young human males and receptionists?" For a second or so, Colin felt as though someone had accidentally set off a box full of fireworks inside his head. While he was still thus indisposed, she went on. "Not that I'm complaining, don't get me wrong. After all, it's why I do this job. It was my cousin Veronica who put me on to it. 'Be a receptionist, Rosie,' she said to me. 'You can pick 'em off like a sniper up a church tower.' I thought she was kidding me until I tried it, and I've never looked back." Colin said.
"There was this lad at the place I used to work," she went on. "A bit like you he was, only taller and wetter. He had this thing for receptionists, leastways one of them. Not me," she added with a sigh, "though not for want of trying. But his receptionist turned out to be an illusion created by the Queen of the Fae to lure him to his doom. And I think he went off us a bit after that. Married a bony little cow and moved to New Zealand. Last I heard he was blissfully happy and richer than Bill Gates. But there you go. Anyhow, you didn't come out here to talk to me. You were thinking about that chubby bird of yours." "She's not a—" "How did you know?"
Rosie twitched her nose at him. "Smell, actually. It's a special talent of my lot. We can smell true love. Like smelling beer on someone's breath. It's a holdover from the old days. My lot used to track their prey by scent. It's pretty dark where we evolved." A burning eagerness to ask who her lot were fought it out with the sure and certain knowledge that he wouldn't like the answer one little bit, and the sure and certain knowledge won.
"Right," he said. Then, "True love?"
If you're interested. It's sort of a cross between garlic and iodine. The smell, I mean, but you wouldn't be able to smell it, like humans can't hear dog whistles."
"Then you're saying—" he hesitated. "Are you sure about that?"
"I'd know it a mile off," she sighed. "If it was just a passing infatuation, it'd be more like sump oil and violets. And good old plain and simple lust, well, it's hard to describe. A bit like creosote mixed with, Fine, Colin said quickly. He realised that, in spite of Rosie's breathtaking exterior, he found her about as luring as a dead badger. She sniffed, clicked her tongue and said, "Thank you so much. There's times when I think I'm losing my touch. Here, what about this?" Rosie didn't vanish or anything. There was no single instant when she wasn't there.
It was just that there was one moment when she was a screamingly gorgeous redhead and another when she was a heart-stoppingly lovely brunette, neither of whom would Colin willingly have touched with a 10-foot pole. "Ah, well," she said, "worth a try. No hard feelings, though in your shoes I don't think I'd be quite so damn picky." Fair comment, but so what? Anyhow, Colin said, a bit awkwardly, "nice to have chatted with you and everything. I'd better be—" She grinned again. "I know, used to it by now. You run along, and when your terribly important fax comes in, I'll let you know. I'll bring it down to your office if you like." "No, please don't bother," Colin said quickly, and she laughed. "Bye," he said, and fled. "How lot?" he thought as he mounted the last stair and slowed down. And what was all that stuff about tracking their prey by scent? One thing was for sure, he was meeting a lot of new and very interesting people these days. True love. Rosie could smell true love, and a fat lot of good that was going to do him if he never saw Fam again, which was likely, since he didn't know where to find her, and he doubted very much whether she'd be coming around looking for him, given the circumstances of their last meeting. On his desk was a pile of paper. It looked difficult and technical, something to do with shift rotations and hourly productivity ratios, and he ignored it. Leave it there long enough and it would eventually turn into coal, maybe even diamonds. Instead, Colin tried to focus on the miserable tangle that his life had recently become. Not so long ago, he decided against running away to Vanuatu on the grounds that, although everything else had turned extremely weird and smelly, there was still a chance that he might be able to make a go of it with Fam, his one true love, as he'd just found out. Indeed, but apparently that wasn't allowed, in which case there really wasn't anything to keep him here, and every reason for him to clear out as soon as possible. "I'm not really a coward," he thought, "or a pathetic loser, or any of the other things I use as excuses for not trying. I think my problem's always been history and geography. I'm Dad's son. I'm here at Hollingshead and Farron. Of course I'll never have a life if I stay here and let it all wash over me. But if I went somewhere else, where nobody knows me..." Someone, something, was standing over him. Something that could open his office door without making a noise.
"You wanted in the machine shop?"
Oscar said. Colin looked up. "Me?"
"Yes, you're in charge. You have to go there and take command."
An image of James T. Kirk on the bridge of the Enterprise flashed into Colin's mind. Me? Take command? Yes, but not of a machine shop. "Sorry," he said. "I can't come right now."
"That is untrue,"
Oscar said, sounding puzzled.
"You have no other duties."
Colin looked up, looked at the thing, the quintessence of human nightmares, in what he assumed was its eye. "That's the point, actually," he said. "I've got no duties at all. I don't owe anybody anything, except," he added, "possibly me. Sorry, just thinking aloud."
"I do not understand."
"No," Colin replied. "I don't suppose you do, but never mind. Try this." He took a deep breath. He was about to be rude to the devil, and he still wasn't really used to being rude to anybody. "I quit. I'm leaving." "Okay."
"You're leaving?"
Oscar twitched.
"Humour?"
It said. "No."
"No humour?"
"No humour. Serious."
"I see."
There was something about the way Oscar said it. Colin had expected anger, but it wasn't that at all. Quite the reverse. It was something a bit like the still, tense excitement of an angler who sees his float bob.
"You wish to abandon Hollingshead and Farron?"
"Yep." Oscar quivered slightly, like a spoiled dog watching a sandwich.
"You intend, then, to forfeit the contract?"
Colin managed to bite back the rest of the word in time. "How do you mean?" he said.
There was a kind of too good to be true sag in Oscar's voice.
What I said. You wish to leave the firm, and in order to do so, you must forfeit the contract. Is that your intention?
Colin pulled himself together. All his life he'd said yes or no to questions he didn't understand, rather than admit his ignorance. This time, however, he wasn't going to do that. Not if it was a choice between saving face and saving the rest of him.
I'm not very good at legal jargon,
he said.
What exactly does forfeit mean?
Oscar sighed.
Quite simple,
it said.
If you leave the firm, it constitutes a fundamental breach of contract, as set out in Section 6, Paragraph 9, subsection B. 2.
Colin was impressed, in spite of himself. Oscar could pronounce brackets.
In the event of unilateral breach by one party, the full consideration falls due immediately on demand.
You're doing it again,
Colin said.
Jargon. Try that again in plain English.
Oscar seemed most embarrassed.
I'm sorry,
it said.
I am not proficient at plain English. It is not much used where I come from. We do not find it conducive to...
It hesitated.
To productivity, perhaps.
It went on.
This is not the best environment for a discussion of this sort. I believe it is traditional to conduct vital negotiations while eating food. Let's do lunch.
I'd rather not, thanks.
Are you sure? I can provide you with a suitably extended spoon. Humour,
it added, hopefully.
I think we should get this straight right now. What are you trying to tell me? What will happen if I just walk out and don't come back?
It was as though Oscar had closed down or gone offline. It stood still and quiet for a long time, to the point where Colin began to wonder if he had killed it.
You want me to tell you that?
It said, at last.
Yes.
Very well. Should you act in the manner you have outlined, the contract will have been breached. We will no longer have to provide workers and material support to your business, and you...
Another pause. Was Oscar feeling squeamish about something? Surely not.
You will have to fulfill your obligations under the contract immediately. Do you understand me?
Colin wilted like a flat tyre. So that was that. If he walked out, Dad would have to go to hell straight away. Not past go. Do not collect £200. Simple as that. Once you paid away the legal gibberish.
Are you sure? He asked.
Yes.
So, I'm stuck here then. Indefinitely.
Oscar shook its head.
Not indefinitely,
it said.
For the term of your father's natural life. And now,
Oscar said,
you must go to the machine shop and exercise authority at once.
Oh, for pity's sake, Colin snapped. Can't I just stay here and sulk? I am sure you don't need me down there. I don't know how to run a factory. Dad does all that.
It is required,
Oscar said.
Balls.
And now he'd sworn at the devil. Just as well his mother couldn't hear him, or she'd be really upset. Tell him he'd come to a bad end, most like.
Or are you going to tell me you'll what's it the contract if I don't?
Oscar hesitated.
It is required,
it repeated awkwardly.
Or there may be a downturn in morale and industrial relations, leading to a decline in productivity.
Colin stood up.
I'll risk it, he said. I think I'll go out for a breath of fresh air.
Oscar sniffed.
There is air in the building,
it pointed out. Colin walked past it onto the landing, then sprinted down the stairs as fast as he could go. At reception, Rosie called out,
Dad Oscar's looking for you.
But he ignored her and bundled out into the street. Outside, he paused. Just getting out of there made him feel a lot better. But it was hardly a plan of action. He looked up and down the street, open to suggestions.
Sod this, he thought.
He'd what? He knew what he wanted to do. He wanted to go to 70 St Mary Axe, see Cassie Clare, and demand that she explained the contract in language that he could understand, so he'd know exactly what kind of hold the bastards had over him. If he knew that, he could at least start working on an escape plan. That was what he'd like to do. But he had an unpleasant feeling it might not be possible. The railway station was closed until further notice. He didn't have a car yet.
Come on, he told himself. There's got to be a way to do a simple thing, like get up to London. Buses, taxi.
Colin had a bad feeling about those two options. Somehow, he had an idea that if he went and stood at the bus stop, he'd be there a very long time. He remembered the cup of tea. Even so, there had to be a way, even if he was right and there was an exceptionally powerful supernatural force bent on making him stay put. So what if they could sabotage public transport? He could hire a car. Yes, of course. Then he'd set off in the opposite direction, make for Kingston or Basingstoke, and then double back and outsmart them that way. Maybe it wouldn't work, but he wouldn't mind trying. It'd be, he grinned sadly, something to do. Hire a car. He remembered. There was a hire car place down on the Richmond Road, only a few 100 yards away. Into his mind flitted an image of Steve McQueen on a motorbike. Of course, in the film, Mr. McQueen had been trying to get home, and here he was, desperate to break out of it. The hire car place was on the left-hand side, just past Telford's. Apparently not. It had been there. He'd seen it only the other day. A large glass-fronted building on a corner. Instead, he found two small buildings, a florist and a mobile phone shop, and, on the opposite side of the road, a photos while you wait place, which he could have sworn he'd last seen down the other end of the road, 3 doors up from Laura Ashley.
This, Colin told himself, is silly.
He stood on the corner, wondering what to do next, and, while his mind was wandering, a taxi pulled up next to him. Its yellow light was on, and the driver was looking at him.
Oh well, Colin thought.
He went over and the driver said,
"Where to?"
"Can you take me to 70 St Mary Axe?" he asked.
"Up in."
There'd be roadworks, of course, or a burst water main, or a tailback. Traffic diverted via Orpington, Salford and the Great Barrier Reef. Humour, as Oscar would say. Colin got in nevertheless. It'd be interesting to see just how far he managed to go before they turned him back. He snuggled into the seat, stretched out his legs and closed his eyes. He was wasting his time, but at least he was out of the office and away from Oscar and the demons for a little while.
70 St Mary Axe,
the driver called out. Colin's eyes snapped open and he leaned forward.
"Are you sure?" he asked.
"Course I'm bloody sure. I do this for a living, you know."
Colin jumped out, handed over money, waved away the change. Just as the driver pulled away, Colin caught sight of the man's eyes. They were strangely red, as though he was a photo of himself taken indoors with a flash.
"Bugger me,"
Colin said aloud, as he stared at the old-fashioned brass plate and the revolving door.
"I made it."
He smiled out of pure exuberant joy.
"Eat your heart out, Steve,"
he added, and barged into the door, which whirled him round a couple of times like a rogue centrifuge, and spat him out into the front office of JWW. "You," said a voice. His eyes opened wide. Couldn't be.
"Fam?"
"Colin!" She was sitting behind the front desk, staring at him. "What are you doing here?"
"I came to see."
Fuck that, he thought.
"What about you? What are you?"
She looked at him with a mixture of misery and contempt. "I work here," she said.
"Here?"
"Yes, here." Fam looked around to see if anybody was watching and lowered her voice. "It was the only job I could find after your dad fired me. Really, Colin, I didn't think it'd be so bloody petty." Colin opened his mouth and closed it again, like a whale catching krill. He told me, straight out, like it was my fault. You dumped my son, he said. You can bloody well get another job. My mum said I should take you to the tribunal, but I told her I don't want anything to do with any of them ever again.
My dad said that?
Yes, he did. Fam scowled at him so fiercely that he winced. So I told him I never wanted a stupid job and he could go to hell.
And what did he say to that?
He just laughed. Thought it was dead funny. So I went home and I looked through the ads in the paper, and this place was the only one that had even given me an interview. Took me on straight away, which just shows some people aren't complete bastards. Colin put a hand on the desk to stop himself falling over. Didn't make sense, his brain was screaming at him. First, all the unseen bloody forces are trying to keep me from finding her, and now they're practically throwing her at me, except that she hates me because my stupid dad, hold it right there, his father, who'd fired her. Go to hell, she told him. And why not?
Listen,
he said, and the urgency in his voice cut her off in mid-protest.
It's really, really complicated and bizarre and hard to explain, but I promise faithfully that I'll try. Okay? But first I've got to see one of the people who works here, Cassie Clay. It shouldn't take...
Cassie Clay? Fam interrupted venomously. Her. The one you were slobbering all over in the office that day, back at your place.
I wasn't bloody slobbering,
Colin hissed.
Look, I'm not the tiniest bit interested in this stupid cow, except that I desperately need to ask her something about a really ghastly, horrible mess we're in at work, and just maybe she might be able to tell me how I can get out of it, and if I can, I'm going to leave Hollingheads and probably the country, and...
Just a fraction of a second's hesitation, but he was right up on top of the wave, so why not carry on and see where it took him?
And if I do that, he heard himself say, I haven't got a clue what I'll do or where I'll go, and you probably think I've gone barking mad, but I genuinely mean this. If it turns out I can go, will you please come with me?
There was a moment's dead silence. You what?
I love you, Colin said. You're my one true love. You're the only reason my life could possibly be worth living, and will you bloody well come with me or not?
Maybe, if a trapdoor in the ceiling had opened and swamped Fam in a runny custard, she might have been marginally more astonished. Too close to call, really.
Well, I hate to hurry you, but I've got to see this dratted Clay woman.
I don't know, she said.
Damn.
Colin breathed out hard through his nose.
All right, tell you what, I'll go and see Cassie Clay, and while I'm in there you can be thinking it over. Then as soon as I'm done, you can tell me what you've decided. All right?
All right, Fam said in a tiny voice. I'll buzz her and ask if she can see you. Colin shook his head.
Tell her I'm on my way up. Where's her office, by the way?
I'm not exactly sure, she replied. It's a rather odd building. You can get lost in it. I'd better ring through to her, 'cause I don't want to lose this job as well. Colin sighed.
Yes, all right, but don't ask if she can spare me 5 minutes. Tell her I've got to see her right now. Matter of life and death. Matter of life after death, actually, but that's part of the long, complicated explanation, so we'll save it for later. All right?
Fam rang through. She'll be straight down, she said. Sounded almost like she was expecting you. Colin shrugged.
She's strange. In fact, I think they all are. Fam, have they told you what it is I actually do here? Because...
Of course they have, she replied. They're tea and coffee importers. It says so on the brass plate outside. She frowned. What's so desperately important and involves tea? She added. Colin felt the grin take control of his face before he could stop it.
I need to dump about 100 tons of it in the harbour,
he said. He almost added humour out of sheer force of habit.
Look, forget I said that. I really will explain, I promise.
The fire door was opening. That'd be Cassie.
And think about what I said. All right?
He hissed as Cassie walked into reception.
Promise.
Fam mouthed yes at him, and he looked away. In here, Cassie said. My office. We won't be disturbed in here. I've got all the documents and stuff. Colin looked around and took in an instant dislike to the place. For one thing, there was something very odd about it. No matter how hard they try not to, people can't help leaving an impression on rooms they spend time in. Sometimes it's obvious. Fluffy cushions, bead curtains, framed photographs of fat children cuddling dogs, cured and stuffed squirrels in a glass case, the smell of forgotten salad rotting in obscurity. Sometimes it's more subliminal. The perfectly tidy desk and immaculately placed furniture of the neurotic, for example. Cassie Clare's office, by contrast, told him nothing at all. It was as though nobody had been in the room for months. But he wasn't interested in rooms, no matter how weird and physically impossible they might be. All he wanted to do was get the information he needed and leave, pausing only to sweep Fam off her feet into his arms on the way out. If they'd laid on all this ambience for his benefit, they'd have been wasting their time. "In here," Cassie went on, "I've got a photocopy of the contract your father signed, along with the correspondence between us and them, notes of my phone conversations, all that sort of thing. Do you want to work through it together or what?" Colin shrugged.
"Do what you like," he said. "What I want to know is, how does it affect me personally? Because that bloody horrible thing that calls itself Oscar told me I couldn't quit or run away, or they'd foreclose at once and my dad'd go straight to, well, you know. So can you look at the paperwork and tell me if that's really true, or whether they're lying about it?"
Cassie nodded. "Bear with me," she said. "I'll have a—" She broke off. First she stared at the contract. She was only on the first page. And then at Colin.
What is it?"
he asked. "Sorry if this sounds like a dumb question," she said. "But what's your father's first name?"
"Colin,"
Colin replied.
"Same as me. What about it?"
Cassie breathed a massive sigh of relief. "That's all right then," she said. "Only when I drew up the contract, his name wasn't in the file anywhere, or in the letter of instruction, so I left a blank for him to fill in. So when I looked at it just now and saw what's been written in there, Colin Derek Hollinghead, I thought for a moment there'd been some sort of terrible—"
"Did you say Derek?"
Cassie looked up. "That's right. Here, say for yourself."
"My father's middle name is Henry."
"What?"
"And I was called Colin Derek after my mum's cousin in—" "Give me that,"
Colin snapped, grabbing the contract from her.
"You must have—"
Dad's handwriting had always been something of a mystery to him. He always wondered how come a forceful, dynamic man like his father could have such childish, girly handwriting.
"Oh, shit,"
he said. Childish and girly, but crystal clear and unmistakable. "I don't understand," Cassie was bleating. Colin laughed.
"Don't you?" he said. "I do. I fucking well understand, all right."
He could feel the anger welling up inside him like a balloon.
"You know what he's done? It wasn't his soul he sold to the devil. It was mine."
3 seconds passed, during which there was no sound at all. "Oh," Cassie said. Which only went to show she might have known a very great deal about magical law and spiritual conveyancing, but absolutely nothing about tact. Colin, on the other hand, seemed to have stopped entirely, as though God had hit the pause button. It wasn't that the anger had gone away. Far from it. Rather, it was now so huge, filling him so completely, that at first he could neither move nor speak, and when the pressure dropped just a little, all he could come out with was a small, flat voice, like the snotty cow in a Japanese car who reminds you haven't put your seatbelt on.
"He can't do that, can he?"
Colin said. "Well, no," Cassie replied quickly. "I mean, if you're not a party to the contract, it's not binding on you, obviously. It'd only affect you if you actually signed." She tailed off, then added, "You did sign, didn't you?"
"Yes. You witnessed my signature?"
"So I did," Cassie replied. "Actually, I remember thinking at the time, why has he got to sign it? It's nothing to do with him. But I assumed it was just an indemnity or something, just so they could cover themselves."
"You thought that?"
Colin said.
very quietly indeed. Yes, but I didn't actually read. You didn't actually read what it said. I see. At least Cassie didn't say sorry at that point. Not because she wasn't about to, her common sense having evaporated like whiskey on a hot stove, but because at that moment the door opened and Fam came in, holding a tray. On it were 2 cups and saucers, a sugar bowl, a milk jug, and a small plate of digestive biscuits. "Thought you might like some tea," she added, putting the tray down on the table, and left. It was only after she'd gone that Colin realised it had been her, and the irony of it burst through his stunned numbness like an armour-piercing shell. Just when he'd got somewhere, just when there was a chance she'd say yes and come with him to Vanuatu or the Andaman Islands and help him with the beach combing and the splitting open of coconuts or whatever the future held for them both, just at that moment, this had to happen. It was just so bloody unkind. "Milk and sugar," Cassie whispered. "Yes, please," Colin replied automatically. "No sugar." "Biscuit." "Thanks." A plate appeared on the periphery of his vision. He reached out and took a biscuit, then stared at it blankly for a second or two, trying to remember what the hell he was supposed to do with it. "So what you're saying is," he said, "I sign the contract, so Dad gets his demon workforce, and I'm the one who goes to hell forever and ever." "Basically, yes," Cassie replied. "And the moment I try and quit or escape, I drop dead on the spot and..." "Yes." Without really knowing what he was doing or why, Colin stirred his tea a few times and drank a mouthful. The milk must have been off because it tasted funny. Wasn't there an old superstition that the presence of the evil one curdled milk? It started already, he thought wildly. How absolutely bloody wonderful. And all this could have been avoided, he went on. Cassie was trying to hide behind her teacup, but he wasn't having that. If you could have been asked to do your job and read the sodding small print. Great. Colin put down his cup, realised he was still holding a digestive biscuit, and closed his hand on it, crushing it into dust. Well, since I'm going to go to hell anyhow, I might as well do something evil and bad while I'm at it, such as strangling you. Something in his tone of voice, perhaps, because Cassie reacted as though she thought he meant it. She choked on the biscuit that she'd been eating, jumped up out of her chair, sending the cup and tray flying, and back towards the door. Colin, now he came to think of it, actually had meant it. "There's a saying," he said, as he stood up and took a step forward. "Something about sheep and lambs," he muttered, "and hanging. Now look," Cassie gabbled quickly, "I'm not promising anything, but maybe if we talk to them really, really nicely." Colin lunged at her. He wasn't blessed with particularly good reflexes or anything like that, but the adrenaline was flowing, and he had all the motivation that anybody could possibly need. Cassie dodged, of course, but her chair was in the way, and she stumbled against it, which slowed her up a bit. In fact, it'd have been a close-run thing if she and Colin hadn't both suddenly stopped dead in their tracks, dropped to the floor like sacks of potatoes, and immediately fallen asleep. Oh my goodness gravy. Can you remember what it is that people drink that makes them fall asleep for 20 minutes? Come on now, you know you do. So, things are getting lively down at the Circle K, well, 70 St Mary Axe, as they always do. I hope you have a lovely weekend, and you take it easy, and you come back and visit in a couple of days for chapter 15. And, of course, as always, please ring the notifications bell. Subscribe if you want to, share if you want to, like if you enjoy it, please leave a like. That always helps me out no end. I know we're flown about this a lot, but it really, really helps me keep going with this, and it lets me know that you're enjoying what I'm making. So take it easy, have a nice weekend, and I'll see you in a couple of days, Petal.